Hey everyone. Today we're going to pull back the curtain on the world of cybersecurity. But look, instead of getting totally lost in a bunch of code and jargon, we're going to frame this whole thing as a detective story. Yeah, we're going to follow the clues, we'll identify the suspects, and see exactly how the digital detectives of our world solve the case when a cyber attack goes down.
All right, so let's get right into it. Here is our roadmap, our plan of attack for today's investigation. We'll start by getting a lay of the land, the digital battlefield. Then we'll look at how the fortresses are built. After that, we'll learn how to spot the very first signs of trouble, analyze all the evidence, and then how to actually respond to an attack. And finally, and this is maybe the most important part, how to learn from the fight so you're stronger next time.
Okay, first things first. Before you can even think about defending yourself, you've got to understand who you're up against and what they're actually after. So let's get to know the players on this digital battlefield.
To really get a handle on this battlefield, you have to know the players. And it's not just one type of person in a hoodie, you know? At the bottom, you've got your script kiddies. They're usually just looking for bragging rights, using tools they downloaded that they don't really understand. Then you have organized crime, and for them, it is all about one thing: money. Think ransomware attacks. Then there are hacktivists, who are driven by some political or social cause. And at the very top, you've got the nation-state actors. These are the government-backed spies, the pros, conducting serious espionage or even sabotage.
So, how do you find your weak spots before they do? Well, this slide shows the two main ways. A vulnerability scan, that's like walking around your house and just checking if you left any doors or windows unlocked. It's automated, it's broad. A penetration test, on the other hand, is completely different. That's when you hire a professional, an ethical hacker, to actively try and break into your house to see if your defenses, your locks, your alarms, if they actually hold up. It's a real-world simulation of an attack.
So, knowing your weak spots, that's step one. Step two is actually building the fortress. So let's see how organizations build their digital defenses, because this is all about the work you do before an attack ever happens.
A huge piece of this puzzle is something called Identity and Access Management, or IAM. The best way to think about this is like a digital bouncer for your entire organization. But it doesn't just check IDs at the front door. It makes sure that once people are inside, they only go to the rooms they're allowed in. Someone from marketing, for example, should have absolutely no reason to access sensitive engineering code, right? Well, IAM is the system that enforces those rules.
Now this is a real game changer. The old way of thinking about security was like a castle with a moat around it. If you made it past the moat and through the front gate, you were generally trusted inside. Zero Trust completely throws that idea out the window. It works on a simple, powerful principle: never trust, always verify. So imagine that instead of one main gate, every single door to every single room in that castle requires you to prove who you are every single time you want to go through it. It makes the entire system so much tougher to crack.
But let's be real. Even with the absolute best defenses, a really determined attacker can sometimes find a way in. So, how does our digital detective get their very first clue? How do they spot that intruder's shadow before any real damage is done?
This distinction right here is absolutely critical. An indicator of compromise, or an IOC, is the evidence you find that something bad has already happened. It's basically finding the ashes after the fire. But an indicator of attack, an IOA, is about spotting the smoke. It's that real-time clue telling you an attack is unfolding right now, and that gives you a precious, fleeting chance to actually step in and stop it.
Okay, so what does that smoke actually look like? Well, these are the kinds of digital tripwires an analyst is looking for on individual computers. Think about a server's processor suddenly spiking to 100% for no reason, or maybe a user account logging in at 3 a.m. from a country they've never been to, or a program trying to mess with system files it has no business touching. These are those subtle little clues that tell you an intruder is on the move.
So once one of those alarms goes off, the real detective work kicks into high gear. An analyst has to take that single clue, that little wisp of smoke, and figure out the entire picture. You know, what is the attacker doing? How'd they get in? And what are they after?
One of the most powerful tools in their toolkit is something called sandboxing. So, if an analyst finds a suspicious file, they can't just open it on their own computer. That would be insane. Instead, they use a sandbox, which is a totally isolated, safe virtual computer. You can think of it like a digital bomb disposal unit. They can safely detonate the malware inside that secure box and just watch what it does, what files it tries to steal, where it tries to connect to, all without any risk to the real systems. It's pretty cool.
But a really sophisticated attack hardly ever happens on just one machine. And that is where a SIEM tool comes in.
The SIEM is like the central security control room. It pulls in data from literally thousands of sources, servers, firewalls, you name it, and puts it all together on a single screen. This lets the analyst connect the dots. They can see the weird login on one server, the strange data transfer on another, and piece together the entire story of the attack as it unfolds across the whole network.
And all this detective work, it follows a very strict, methodical process. First, you preserve the evidence. You never work on the original machine. You make a perfect digital copy. Then, you analyze the malware and start tracing the attacker's footsteps through the network logs. Finally, you have to confirm the full scope of the breach, what machines were touched, what data was seen or stolen. It's this incredibly meticulous process to build an airtight case.
All right, so once the detective understands exactly what's happening, it is time to go on the offensive. This whole phase is about fighting back, containing the damage, and kicking that intruder out for good.
And this is the official playbook for handling a crisis. First up, containment. You unplug the infected computers from the network to stop the bleeding, basically. Second, eradication. You go through and systematically remove every single trace of the attacker. Third, recovery. You bring everything back online from clean, trusted backups. And notice that very last step, lessons learned. That's so important, it's actually our final section. And through that whole response process, this principle is the absolute bedrock. It is so important it's worth saying again. You always preserve the original evidence. Just like a physical crime scene, you can't go touching things and messing it up. Every action is taken on a perfect copy. This keeps the digital crime scene pristine, not just for the analysis, but for any legal action that might come later.
So, the attack is over, the systems are all clean, but the job is not done. Honestly, in a lot of ways, the most important work is just beginning. The goal now is to make sure this exact type of attack can never, ever happen again.
This really illustrates a huge shift in modern defense. Instead of just sitting back and waiting for an alarm to go off, the best security teams now do something called threat hunting. They're actively searching their own networks for signs of advanced attackers who might be hiding in the shadows. They might use new intelligence about an attack group, or they might just start with an assumption like, okay, let's just assume an attacker is already inside. Where would we find them? It's a proactive search for the things you don't know are there.
So the whole point, the big takeaway, is this. Cybersecurity isn't a destination you arrive at, it's a process. It's a continuous feedback loop. You defend, you detect, you respond, and most critically, you learn. The intelligence you gather from one single attack is what you use to build stronger walls and set smarter tripwires, making the entire organization more resilient for whatever comes next.
And that brings us to our final question, something to really chew on. After seeing this entire life cycle, what do you think? Should organizations put all of their time and money into building these impenetrable walls, a perfect defense? Or is the smarter play to focus more on proactive hunting and lightning-fast response, a really powerful offense? It's the central debate in security today, and there is no easy answer. Thanks so much for joining me.